You're listening to the Control System Integrators Association's Talking Industrial Automation podcast, where you get to know the people that make modern manufacturing and processing possible. Now, here is your host, Tony Verhoeven.
Thanks for downloading the Talking Industrial Automation podcast. This is a show to help you get to know the people that make modern manufacturing and processing possible. I'll be talking industrial automation with CSIA system integrators and industry partners to get a better understanding of how they help their clients solve manufacturing and process challenges, and how they became successful in their careers. Along the way, we will touch on system integration best practices, technology, trends, and challenges. Whether you are a manufacturer, end user, supplier, or system integrator, I hope you will enjoy the insights CSIA members will bring to this podcast. Hi, it's Tony Verhoeven, and we're talking industrial automation with Matt Wells of GE Digital. Hi, Matt.
Hello, how are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks so much for joining us. I know we've been trying to find some time in our schedules here, and so we finally did it. So here we are.
Awesome. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Well, I noticed you've got some scratched on the back of your whiteboard there. So there's no super secret proprietary knowledge there, right?
Well, there is, but it's up to you to figure out what it is.
All right. All right. If you guys can, people listening and watching can figure out what it is here through through the non-HD camera, whatever, then good luck. You can have it, right? All right. So anyway, well, so great. Today, Matt, I just wanted to sit down and, I like to talk to our members, but, we know GE and we know the big companies that are out there, but it's really obviously the people behind them, behind the logos and behind the corporate structure that really makes things happen. So that's what I wanted to do today is just kind of get to know you a little bit and maybe help us understand what GE Digital is and where it is and kind of where it is in the landscape of things. Because I think that GE has obviously, you guys have several business units, and especially maybe in industrial automation as well. You guys have had some different business units here. So maybe give us a lay of the land of kind of, first of all, what you do there and what your business unit does and kind of where it is in the landscape of industrial automation and controls and manufacturing. Sure.
So I'm vice president of product management, and I'm responsible for a few areas within GE Digital. I'm responsible for our automation software products, so things like iFix and Simplicity and Workflow, IGS and Batch and many others. I'm also responsible for our manufacturing execution software. So that'd be products like Plant Applications, Production Manager, Scheduler. And then I'm also responsible for what we call connectivity into our apps portfolio. So basically looking at how do I get data out of OT systems as well as IT systems and up into the cloud for our broad set of apps that we have there. So GE Digital itself is a I guess I'd call it a tier one business unit within GE. So, GE has obviously power, aviation, healthcare, transportation, and we also have GE Digital sitting at the same level. It was formed about 2 years ago, and it was a consolidation of a couple of other different entities within GE. So GE had formed what we call the Center of Excellence, so Software Center of Excellence, as well as we had units around cybersecurity. And then we had the traditional automation, industrial automation business unit within GE that was called Intelligent Platforms at the time. And so they took the software components out of Intelligent Platforms and merged it with those other two entities I mentioned, and that became the foundation of what GE Digital is. And then along the way, we've made some acquisitions. Some of the bigger ones were Meridian and ServiceMax. And the goal of GE Digital within GE is really to be the core foundation of software development and delivery within GE. Now, the way that we are structured, obviously, is that within each of the business units, they maintain their own software product lines and people and entities that develop software. But we interact with them very frequently. So we interact with them around the platform, Predix, in the sense that the business units are building their applications on top of Predix, as well as we actually sell a lot of our software through the business units as well, but obviously for their specific vertical flavors.
Very good. Very good. So when you say it's software, this could be a lot of different softwares. It's not necessarily just focused in on manufacturing and industrial automation necessarily.
Yeah. So I guess the way I would describe it is I think the main software pillars we have automation software. So we're talking HMI SCADA, right? So that would be, plant floor, machine control, and process control. And we do that in both infrastructure. So we do that for utilities like water, power, pipelines, as well as on the manufacturing side. And then, going up a level from there, we have manufacturing execution software. And so that is really around production tracking, quality tracking, reliability tracking, controlling the flow of process orders, creating the genealogy of materials through a manufacturing plant. And so there's the first two. The next major category is what we call asset performance management, and that is really around defining and the strategies around maintaining the reliability of your assets, as well as we have predictive analytics around being able to detect whether that asset is going to fail before it fails. And we have a whole set of capabilities around that. The fourth major category is what we call field service management. And this is really where we're managing the workforce that goes off and actually repairs either broken assets or does preventative maintenance on assets. And we're really facilitating the scheduling, the optimization of where they go and who does what, ensuring that the field service workers have the right information at the right time in order to perform their necessary tasks. And then, obviously the tracking and optimization around those processes as well. And then finally, we also have a pillar that we call operations performance management, which is really where we're leveraging analytics to improve processes within industrial facilities.
Excellent. And you oversee all of that then?
No, I oversee two of them. I oversee. So from a product management perspective, I oversee automation and MES, and then we have separate leaders who are looking over APM, OPM, and field service management. And I should also mention, supporting it all is our platform. So we are. We're building, and so we actually deploy these solutions both on premise and in the cloud. And so we really have a strategy at GE about a hybrid cloud model. And particularly in the cloud, we support our applications with the Predix platform. And that platform itself, is industrial grade. We designed it very specifically to support the kind of services and applications that are built for industrial facilities. And we also offer that, really as an extension to those apps. So when a customer takes one of our apps and deploys it, and then they want, to build additional capability that's not covered by our apps, we have the platform with that core set of services that enables that.
So what's going on right now in your area that's super exciting? What really gets you out of bed about, you're like, man, I'm really excited about that we're working on this, or that we just completed that, or that we're going to do this?
So in my particular area, we have lots of exciting things going on at GE Digital, but in my particular area, what we're really excited about is improving the performance of the operators. And it's kind of funny, right? Because, when we say we're automation, right? It's always been about, how do I automate tasks to prevent a person having to do it?
Right.
But I think what we've realized, what I think a lot of people in industry realize, and even Elon Musk said it recently, is that that people are highly underrated. You know what I mean? And they're incredibly valuable to running any kind of facility. And so what we're really excited about is what we've been working on is actually improving the performance of the operator themselves. So really trying to, create capabilities within our software that improve the human performance, enables them to do their tasks more efficiently and effectively.
Very good. Very good. So that's interesting that you mentioned that about obviously the human side of things, because I think a lot of people, at the consumer level and maybe even politically speaking, they see automation. You're like, it's going to replace workers and it's going to affect the labor economy and labor force in a negative way. And I in fact, just like 2 hours ago, I was talking with Tom Burke of the OPC Foundation, and we had a similar kind of touch into this, how, automation is elevating the workforce. It's adding skill to the workforce. It's a more informed and educated workforce. Yeah. Right. So it's interesting. This is definitely a thing. This is definitely, a phenomenon that's happening where, just like, people say, well, print is dead, radio is gone, or, it's like these things aren't gone. They're not dead. Cold calls, right? They're if you listen to anybody, they always say these things are dead, which immediately forces me to like turn off my ears, because things aren't dead. They just change. Things are changing. Yeah. So automation is changing labor and production.
Correct. I would totally agree. I think I also think there's some market dynamics that are making it more important now for operators to be able to do their jobs more effectively. And I'll explain it this way. I think, 40 years ago, a lot of companies were making to stock, right? They were like, in manufacturing, they were like producing the same thing over and over again. And, a lot of automation was put in that made it very easy to do that repetitively. But I think in today's landscape, the demands upon a lot of companies to be flexible in their processes and change according to customer demand is increasing, and it's requiring them to respond much more quicker. And in order to do that, they have to have the flexibility in their plant, and they need people in order to do that. And I think also, if you look at, especially in North America and the Western world, the trends of employment in manufacturing, continue to decrease, right, as a percentage. And so more and more demands are being put on the people who are there to perform more and more tasks. And so I think, part of what we're thinking about and the tools that we're deploying in our software is to make every operator an expert. Right, is to enable them to not just do the rote tasks that they do every day, but also enable them to better troubleshoot the abnormal conditions and respond to those and be able to fix those things without having to pull in a ton of support staff.
Very good. Very good. So can you give us some sort of like use case or case study on what are you guys doing specifically that is, what's the old way, what's the broken way, and then what are you guys doing specifically in your software and your platform that would help increase productivity or help that operator?
Yeah, so from a operator perspective, I think there's a couple of themes, right? So one, it's about the actual application, the HMI application itself, and so we're doing things like introducing model-based navigation that comes out of the box, right? And the idea there is to create intuitive applications that are very simple for the operators to understand and interact with. And what was interesting to us is we early on we had gotten a number of UX designs from our customers. Some both internal to GE from what our GE businesses were doing, like in power, as well as external, like from our external customer base. Some life sciences companies and some other manufacturing companies. And each one of these UX designs that we looked at, and these were UX designs that these people had individually commissioned about how to improve the HMIs for their operators. And they all came back with basically some similar themes. And frankly, they all looked quite similar. And one thing they looked at was model-based navigation, right? They wanted navigation to be intuitive across their whole workforce. And they wanted to be able to bring in new people who could then easily figure out what was going on. The second thing was they wanted a card-based layout. They wanted to get away from the traditional method of creating, drawing these complex schematics in their graphics. And they wanted more of a, dashboard-like card-based outlay for their operators. And then, of course, finally, it was a lot of the concepts that are baked into ISA 101, which was the color palettes and ensuring, that you have the grayscale for most of your stuff, and you're very selective about what you use for color in terms of abnormal conditions. And so we've been building those concepts into our software, not only from creating a new set of objects that follow the typical, the ISA 101 concepts of grayscale and simplification and reducing, the fancy flying 3D objects that everyone had in their graphics. Mm-hmm. But also making it very easy for customers and SIs to construct these applications by creating the embedded model-based navigation, as well as the ability to create these cards and layouts and then template them and be able to map them together very easily.
Very good. So what does that translate, into the real world then, as far as what's the ROI of doing all that? Does it make the operator more efficient, less mistakes, more productivity?
Yeah. So the way that we really look at it is so it's less time to troubleshoot issues. It's the ability that when something goes wrong, they can figure out what's going wrong faster and then be able to troubleshoot it much faster. And we're also and that's from a user standpoint, but we also look at it from a deployment and model, how long it takes to actually construct the application standpoint. So we look at it, both from the users of the application, but the people building the application. And so, for example, by being able to template the application and not having to create the entire user experience, by having default, model-based navigation, by having these card layouts, we're building standard cards for a lot of the commonly stuff used. It speeds up the building of an application. And so we see, these themes pass all the way through into the total cost of ownership, right? So if you can reduce by 40% the amount of time it takes to construct an application and simultaneously reduce by 40% the time it takes for an operator to troubleshoot an issue, purely by creating these threads, like the model-based navigation, the card layouts, that's where we're seeing the big value for the customer.
That's super cool. Yeah, that really translates all the way through then. And obviously, time is money, so that it translates into probably lower licensing fees or however, what your business model is, right?
Yeah, we are. So we are introducing new ways that we're licensing the software, particularly as we're going to new web-based clients. So, one thing that we've done with this is that as we're building this new HMI capability, we're doing it all in a pure native web-based architecture, right? So we natively support mobile applications. And as we've been rolling that out, we've been creating new unlimited pricing models associated with that as well.
Very good. Now, how are you communicating all of this to your clients? Are you working directly with end users? I think you guys do you guys have a system integrator program? I mean, is part of your go-to-market through system integrators, or how do you communicate your capabilities?
Yes. Well, so we primarily, from an automation perspective and an MES perspective, we primarily go through partners. So that is our primary delivery model. And so we do have our own. We have a solution provider program where it's fairly standard in a lot of respects, in that you get access to software for both the training as well as the pre-project build process, and then we offer training as well as a part of that. So we offer in-class sessions. We offer hosted web-based sessions, so you can still have instructor-led training, but through a web environment, as well as on-demand training that we're publishing out to make it accessible again via the web. And this is why we're sitting with you here today, is because we're trying to get the word out that we've been making a ton of advances in our technology, and we've making a ton of improvements in our core products, and we want to invite more people to come in and try it out.
Very good, very good. And now, do you guys work with? Do you guys have a specific, I guess, channel through system integrators? You have like a system integrator program, or you're engaging directly where they're coming to you and they're getting this knowledge from you and then taking this through to the end?
Yeah. So we do have that. We do have a dedicated system provider, or we call it a solution provider program, but it's basically a system integrator program. Same thing.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, I didn't know if that was the same thing here. That's my nomenclature. So different people use different solution or different nomenclature. So I wasn't make sure we were on the same page. So
GE, we like to constantly invent our own acronyms.
Yeah. Well, this industry. Well, I wish every industry has their acronyms, but this one in particular. Wow. Yeah. And I used to in a previous life, I used to sell print services to associations who have, obviously meetings and things like that. And associations, of course, are 100% acronyms because that's what they go by. So it was always interesting. And of course, they all have their certifications and programs and things like that as well. So it's this code that you have to learn and kind of figure out, especially in this industry. So
yes.
What's happening? And you've outlined a little bit the kind of what's exciting, what's going on. I guess externally, what's happening in manufacturing and industrial automation that you're becoming aware of, or that you're not quite ahead of yet, and that you're like, I have to get my arms around this, or we have to tackle this, and this is bigger than not just GE, but everybody. This is bigger than all of us that we all have to try to tackle.
So I think IoT is the one that is happening the fastest, and I think what I see is really interesting is I think a lot of people are trying to figure out how to leverage IoT, but it is still very much an emerging, morphing space. And from a kind of core automation perspective, most of the people I talk to are like, IoT is great, but I have a closed control network and I'm not letting anybody in, and it's firewalled this and so on and so on. But I see a lot of people starting to change their mindsets. I think people are realizing that the air gap network security isn't as fail-safe as everyone thought it was. And so I think, there's a lot more people, looking to, create new network architectures, but that also opens up the opportunity to start leveraging the cloud more, because, once you get rid of the air gap and you actually start having, real in-depth security across the various layers, then you can start leveraging the cloud to complement your on-premise solution. I think that's the other big thing too, is that when we started in IoT, we were very cloud focused. It was just cloud. And I think a lot of people were. And what I got a lot, especially working in automation, was, you're never taking the, control system out of the plant, right? You're never taking the SCADA or the MES out of the plant. It's got to remain there because, if you ever lose connection to the outside world, everything stops.
Right.
And I think the whole market's starting to, figure that out. The whole IoT market's really starting to figure that out. And in consequence, the strategies are adjusting. And so, we're adjusting too, right? So we have a heavy focus now on looking at the hybrid cloud, right? So when we talk about IoT, it's about applications that can support the people working in the plant. And so, I'll give you an example. One of the things that we've been doing around specifically our HMI SCADA products is that we have created the ability for a user, an SI, to create a graphic in either iFix or Simplicity, and then simply publish that graphic out to the cloud. And so, and then we create the data channel of the data going up. And what that allows us to do is basically create a mirrored running copy of the system on premise, but also running in the cloud. Now, of course, everybody goes, well, why would you want to do that? And the answer is it's for remote support. Because, today, you hear lots of stories about, there's always one or two experts in the plant. And when they go home at the end of the day and, at night, something goes wrong, the operators are calling them. They're saying, how do I fix this? And a couple different things happen. Either they try and troubleshoot it over the phone, or they're logging in via some VPN capability to get access to the core system, or they're hopping in their car and they're driving back to the plant. By creating that cloud copy of what's going on premise, it makes it much easier for that person at home to see the same thing that the operator is looking at, and then speeds up the resolution and the troubleshooting process, right? So going back to what I was saying before, it's all about decreasing the amount of time it takes to troubleshoot, right, but also decreasing the amount of time it takes to set up the frameworks and the solutions to allow that to happen.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. I totally get it because, you think about, have you ever tried to, lead somebody through doing something on their computer and you can't see what they're doing? And like, open up GoToMeeting. Let me let me help you, right? That remote support that way. And I definitely see that, we're in this kind of this gig economy, this hired gun type of thing. So bringing in, I've recently met these guys who run a website who, it's like the Uber for system integrators, right? And so if you've got unused capacity at your firm, and you're between projects or whatever, somebody needs somebody. Hey, guy, can you get over here real quick? I don't have the engineers, but let me bring them in and I'm going to pay them. And so they can find somebody with the exact type of knowledge that they need. And I'm thinking, boy, this is a great example of like, if this someone, you hire someone, you bring a consultant who has no idea how or history of how your network was set up. But hey, while you're on the plane, you can connect and you can see, walk right in and know exactly what to do.
Exactly.
So what a great application or a great ability. So I totally get it. Very cool. Very cool.
Yeah.
So, what does your company, I guess, see is, or maybe you personally, what do you guys see as like, I guess a major, challenge with clients, and industrial automation right now? What are some of the things that clients maybe aren't getting that you need to help them understand right now?
So I think it all, comes back to the questions around IoT, right? I think, again, I mean, so I went to Singapore and I met with the Singapore Economic Development Board, and they said, "Oh, I want to take you to all these companies and figure out, how you can help them." And so we walked into this noodle manufacturing plant, and it was it was quite rudimentary. I mean, there was, they had the vats and they had, the extrusion, but they still had a guy sort of pulling the crank to, cut the noodles or do this and that. And they're looking at me and they're like, how can we leverage analytics to improve this plant's operation? And I was, I'm looking around, I'm like, well, I think the first thing you do is put in an automation system, because that'll give you access not only to the data that's coming off the machines, but it'll actually allow you to action the results of those analytics. But the point I'm trying to make is that the desire to leverage big data and analytics is so strong, that people are scrambling around trying to figure out how to actually put it into practice and leverage it. And so that, I think, is the biggest challenge for us is both like helping customers determine what they actually need to do, or how to refine their desire to, leverage analytics in a way that is much more, that actually drives business outcome. Because it's very easy for somebody to come in and say, I'm going to sell you, 6 months of data science, that will produce a result, but we don't know whether it will produce a result that actually makes you money or saves you money. And I frankly think that is the biggest problem. And frankly, as digital has evolved, we've seen, we've evolved according to that shift, right? We've done, sort of broad projects, around IoT, but we see far more value in trying to steer customers into sort of specific app categories, that leverage IoT technology, and then simply, doing extensions off that if a customer, wants to accomplish additional goals. And so I think that is the biggest challenge, is trying to steer customers into the right mindset about, what to use and what to buy, and how to, making sure that they're getting the value out of it.
So this is Matt, this is one of kind of my favorite topics, especially to dig into with different folks in this industry. The notion that, we have a very educated customer these days, right? So they do all the research. You guys put out white papers and data sheets and education. And so by the time they talk to you, they probably have half their mind made up about what the solution can or should be. So when and where does their mindset get changed? Do you find that they come in with like, hey, we want you to do this, and you're like, well, wait a minute, whoa, back up. How about you consider this, or let's start over?
I think, so that's a great question. I think it sort of depends on the category and the space, you know what I mean? And it continues to evolve, right? And of course, it's dependent on the maturity level of the customer as well. When it comes to like HMI SCADA, I think, I think a lot of customers have a very good idea of what they're trying to accomplish, and they do a lot of research on what the tools are. And so, as you say, they have a very good idea. And when they finally come talk to you, it's kind of like trying to refine that final opinion. And we by bringing in the additional capabilities and the stuff that they don't know that we're doing that can complement that system, that's where we see us able to change customers' minds. I think as you move up the stack, it gets more and more gray. I think, if I talk about predictive analytics, right? There are a lot of customers out there, bigger ones, enterprise customers, who may have teams of engineers that have been doing kind of predictive analytics, but they do it in spreadsheets, right? And they're very, and they tend to use physics-based models versus things like machine learning or those kind of algorithms. And so, as we've been rolling out, and we've seen this for quite a few years, is we've gone to deploy like machine learning based solutions. One of the most interesting things is we get into the debate with the engineering department, because they're like, I'm smart guys, I know how to do this, but they don't understand what machine learning can bring to the table. And so we have to do things like run trials where we can actually prove that we can detect things that they can't. And then that, totally blows open the conversation and changes the mindset.
Right. Yeah, it's the old forest for the trees type of adage or whatever. Like you can't see your hand in front of your face, sort of thing. So yeah.
Yeah. But it is a more immature industry, right? So there's you see a lot more of that versus, the more mature industries where you have sort of finite space.
Right. And you talk about, going back to IoT, it's like, it's the new bright, shiny thing, the toy of like, have this. I mean, I bought a GPS, in 2002 and I bought it and I had no idea what I wanted to do with it. Like, look at this, honey. Let's go do this. And then we're like, hey, and then we discovered geocaching. You're like, oh, but it was cool. It attached to my Handspring Neo, PDA thing. And I'm like, oh, let's go try this out. It was an attachment. Let's go try this out.
Yeah.
So, it's a bright, shiny thing. And so I think you're right. People will start to figure out, let's get it. And then we'll figure out what to do with it. But it's, definitely in its infancy.
Yeah.
So let's back up a little bit here. I know I wanted to talk a little bit about. We mentioned OT and IT, and I think that's another big topic that I always like people to weigh in on, because this, the talk of the town is that the OT and IT are converging, and you mentioned the person who are like, well, we've got this closed system, and we're not so sure about opening this up here. What are your kind of thoughts on that converging, and kind of maybe convincing someone to like open their network up a little bit, and then obviously having these two departments come together?
So I would say that, I see it changing, because, with GE, we often talk about, what are the opportunities for business improvement, right? And if you look at the data, right, like in the mid 20th century, there were a lot of advances relative to automation, putting in controllers, these systems, and that generated a ton of business improvement. From the 90s and sort of early 2000s, there was a second wave where we were really starting to employ, computing power to drive, again, a whole new set of advances. And I think what's happening now is that, and again, I'm talking broad average numbers, right? Because, individual companies would be different stages of the journey. What's happening now is that people are struggling to figure out how to get that next wave of improvement. And where we believe a lot of that improvement is going to come, and where I think a lot of analysts believe the improvement is going to come, is around leveraging more data, is about integrating data in new ways to drive different behaviors. So rather than sort of deploying all these systems in isolation, we're now incorporating more and more data. And so one example is, we had a utility customer out in Australia, and they had a wide geography as part of their framework, and they would pump water uphill and then let it flow down. Right, that was they had the advantage of geography in order to leverage that. But what they did was they created a system where they tied that pumping to the spot price of electricity, and they had some analytics running so that whenever the spot price of electricity went down, that's when they would start pumping uphill. Right. And then when it went up, then they would stop and they would let gravity do the work, right? And so that gets you that next wave of process improvement. So I'm coming back to your IT/OT question.
Yep.
So what that means, though, is that you're now taking IT data, right? The spot price of electricity, maybe some data coming out of your ERP system about, your buy contracts and how that all works. And you're pulling that data into a set of analytics that then are starting to issue commands actually down into the control system. And so in order to get that whole optimization cycle working, you need that convergence of IT and OT. And so I think a lot of companies, for that reason, are forcing those two functions to start coming together. I also think there's the unfortunate aspect of cost being taken out of the plans that is also forcing the integration of IT and OT, just from the sheer lack of people in the plants to be able to manage them separately anymore. But those two things, I think, are some key driving factors about why those different layers are really starting to merge and think as one.
Absolutely. No, that's a great analogy or a case study in that. There's something about how you describe that it just seems like you're trying to get some sort of perpetual motion thing out of this, and it just maybe it doesn't work or something like that. Pump it up, coming down, perpetual energy, something like that. It made me think of that.
Yeah. Well, it's probably won't be too long before somebody figures that out,
right?
That they can use gravity-based, electrical generation just to take advantage of that margin difference.
That little bit. Have you seen this? They have these in Africa, I think, in some of these kind of off the grid, tribes that have these lights, and they're like gravity-based lights, so they can hang them and hang them up, and then there's some sort of like not a pendulum, but just like a weight at the bottom, and it slowly goes down, and it's got like a little dynamo thing in there, and it generates the light so that they can, because if you're in a tribe in Africa somewhere, and you're out there, and like when the sun goes down, okay, day ends, right? And so now, they're kind of extending, like, okay, bringing this to these people who can, like, okay, now they can get more production, they can do more within their life, but by having just light and by having light to read or whatever. So it was kind of a cool thing. So anyway, I digress, but it reminded me of that sort of thing. Gravity and energy.
There's so many fascinating things going on in GE, around this whole space. Like you talk about lights, within our current business, what they've been doing is they've been padding their actual industrial lights with a lot of additional sensors. And so, now that when you go put a light into either a street or a hospital or a parking lot, you can start doing things like detection of where things are just based off of that light. And so they're basically creating these mesh detection networks just as part of selling light bulbs. And so one of the cool things that they did, for example, in a hospital, was by putting these industrial lights in, they can start actually doing like patient, like stretcher tracking. Like where is the stretcher, which hallway is it in, where is there space available, what rooms are free, and it's just, leveraging sort of the advances in the core technology allows you to start doing all sorts of, new interesting things.
That's cool stuff. It's an exciting time that we live in here. It's both interesting and wonderful and a little terrifying, I think, at the same time, about what we can do with this stuff. You look at some of the work that like Boston Dynamics is doing with the robotics, and you're like, if you connect that to Google, game over, right? It's Skynet. It's a little scary.
That's right.
So, well, Matt, I really appreciate your time today. I guess I wanted to maybe we'll slow down and we'll redirect a little bit and just kind of get to know you a little bit here. What where did you grow up, and how did you describe kind of like how you got to GE? What's your pedigree, so to speak?
So I grew up in Toronto, so I'm Canadian, and I went to a university in a town just outside of Toronto, London, Ontario.
Mm-hmm.
And I started off as a science nerd, so I was, in science but it's funny. I was sitting in the library, and I would be sitting there, and I was like in second year, and I was like looking at my friends and what they were working on. I was like, it's a lot more interesting than what I'm working on. And so at the end of second year, I kind of had an epiphany. I was sitting there, and I was, it was like a career session, right? And I was sitting there, and they were talking, all about how great science careers was. And I thought, you know what? I want to be an engineer. And so I literally got up from that session, and I walked across campus, and I enrolled in engineering. And I probably should have known, because, both my grandfathers, they were both engineers, so I come from, a history of engineering.
Excellent. Now, were your parents engineers or scientists?
No. So my father was a doctor, and but no, it skipped a generation, right?
Very good. And so, as a kid, did you have any indication that you might become an engineer? Were you tearing apart your computer or toys or cars or anything like that?
I like to build things, and I still like to build things. And I like to fix things. I don't like to take apart things necessarily, but if something breaks, I will take it apart and try and fix it. But I was always trying to build new things, and I still do. So most recently, I built a rather fancy treehouse for my kids. Where suspended nicely on special bolts, and it's got walls and a tin roof, and the whole deal.
Wow!
Part of my goal with that is to get them out of the house, so they'll leave me alone.
Does the tree have Wi-Fi?
I did install a new router that Wi-Fi would reach the treehouse.
Awesome! Yeah, the kids are out there on their iPads or whatever, right? So playing Minecraft or PUBG, which is super relevant right now. So the kids are playing.
Yeah, it was kind of funny because I kind of fell into software. I got my degree in chemical engineering, and I started off working where I was building simulations for petrochemical industries. So I'd be designing like simulators of distillation columns and building simulations of HF alkylation reactors, and just kind of from there I sort of wound up. I think one of the biggest sort of transitions was I went from doing that to writing an actual compiler to convert, a Honeywell control system code into, Fortran, so we could run it in our simulators. And so from there, I kind of started getting more and more involved in different kinds of software and so on.
Very good, very good. Well, that's another feather in the cap of compilers. In fact, again, I was mentioning I was talking to Tom Burke from OPC, and that was also his kind of entry point into control systems and things like that. Working for his previous employer. So yeah, that's interesting. So I don't know if there's something to that, right? It's all that developing some sort of software or developing some sort of fix and building it into a program. And somehow it seems how you find these for Honeywell or for Rockwell or for Siemens or whatever, you all of a sudden here you are.
And actually I spent many years in services basically being a system integrator. I was mostly more on the manufacturing execution side.
Okay.
But I totally understand, because when I built, and I probably shouldn't say this, but when I built the compiler, I had no training whatsoever in that kind of coding. None. It's more just me kind of looking stuff up and saying, "Oh, that's how you do that. I think I can do that," and then trying it out. And honestly, that's what is a lot. My experience as a system integrator, it was a lot like that, right? I mean, you have a problem and you find a way to solve it, and you just kind of figure it out.
I think figure it out is definitely the theme because there are industrial automation degrees now. But there's a handful, and it seems like some universities are starting to realize that they need to, not just crank out double E's and then say, go figure it out. There are, some threads, or channels to let's generate more, engineers who can do this specific kind of work, and it seems it's very common, right? You come out of a marketing, I came out, with a marketing degree, but had no clue on how to do paid advertising or AdWords or analytics or anything like that. You just have to figure it out. So thank goodness for YouTube.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah. Well, yeah. YouTube, I think, is definitely the wave of the future, and we've been publishing a lot more content on there too because we need to create that self-serve market for guys like me to go figure it out.
Yeah. Well, it's one of those things where if after you figure it out, we'll go make a video because you're going to help the next person out there. And so, it's that crowdsourced knowledge that is, that's the most wonderful part of the internet, is that, we can all share each other. You can go to a training or a conference or symposium or something like that. But a lot of times, the smartest person in the room isn't the person at the podium. It's someone in the front row or maybe the back row.
Yeah.
So, Matt, it's really been a pleasure to talk to you. I know you have to let you go. You probably have to run to another meeting here. So I appreciate you carving out some time for us and help us get to know you a little bit better.
Well, thank you for having me. I really enjoyed the chat, and I hope that it was illuminating for some people. And yeah, I look forward to seeing you and chatting with you again.
Sounds good. We'll do that. We've been talking industrial automation with Matt Wells of GE Digital. Thanks so much and take care.
Thank you.
If you enjoyed the podcast, please subscribe in iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Help others find us by sharing your favorite episode with a colleague and give us a rating in iTunes. Visit CSIAexchange.com/podcast for a full list of episodes. Contact us at podcast@controlsys.org. podcast@controlsys.org. Thanks to bensound.com for the music.
Thanks for listening to the Talking Industrial Automation podcast. Read the Industrial Automation blog and find and research qualified system integrators at CSIAexchange.com. For more information on why your system integrator should be CSIA certified, visit controlsys.org. controlsys.org.